Welcome to Mike Tales with Midamba, where we dive into stories that matter most and uncover the human side of today's global challenges. Today, we are turning our focus to Syria, a country that has been at the center of one of the world's most devastating conflicts for over a decade now. While the headlines may fade, the struggles and resilience of the Syrian people remain, from ongoing political tension to a dire humanitarian crisis. Syria's story is far from over. In this episode, we will explore the latest developments on the ground, the role of global powers in shaping Syria's future, and the untold stories of those living through the unimaginable circumstances. Join us. My guest is Jeff Winston. Of course, he'll introduce himself better than I've done. He will bring invaluable insights into the current realities in Syria and what we can all learn and do in response. So you can grab your coffee if you take coffee and settle in. Grab your juice, grab your coffee, grab your whatever tea or your popcorn and settle in and join us for a candid conversation about a conflict that demands our attention and compassion. Let's get started. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, Jeff.
It's a fairly cold evening right here in Kenya. So it's a good evening on my end, probably late night on your side. But of course, we're also in the festive season. So season greetings to you and your loved ones. I'm well, and it's quite up to the
Merry
minute.
Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you too and your family. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Jeff, how did you find my introduction?
Sometimes I feel like I need to get to New York Times, do myself an article about me, because I feel like once I don't enough to describe myself. So if you can link me up with the New York Times, guys, maybe I'll be more convincing to do an article.
All right, Karibu Sana Jeff. You can go ahead and introduce yourself. Who is Jeff?
Well, Jeff Wilson is my name. Professionally, I'm a trained clinical nutritionist and dietitian. I'm a young person, not Gen Z though, but Gen Z at heart. Interested into world, political, and current affairs. Just apart from my career into the medical world, I also have a keen interest in current global affairs, the shifting dynamics in the geopolitical arena in the world, the changing circumstances within, the West, the East, the Middle East, and there's so much geopolitical realignments that is happening globally right now. We have the BRICS summit, for example, rising up, trying to counter the influence of the US. We have the continuous rise of China to counter the influence of US as well. So there's so much going on in the geopolitical world. Not forget our country, Kenya as well. So much is changing on a daily scale. You wake up every morning, things change. People who are enemies 1 second ago, tomorrow they are shaking hands and they are in a camaraderie. People who are close, muscle buddies, tomorrow they're exchanging unpleasant and kind words on TV. So the world is changing. Dynamics, a lot is changing in the political space and the political sphere. So I'm just an interested party. I'm not a politician.
Interested party, indeed. Now, you have just mentioned about something about China. Do you think China is becoming more influential in that region right now, or is it sticking to its typical, non-intervention policy? What's your thoughts?
I think China has constantly become a rising star and a dominant force in the political sphere. especially after coming into power of Xi Jinping, the current Chinese president, who was trying to assert the authority of China on the political space. Remember, China previously has been in a more of dictatorial rule, the days of Mao Zedong, coming now into Xi Jinping right now, trying to revolutionize China into a democracy. Remember, it's not purely democratic. There's still some elements of dictatorial rule. We see what is happening in Hong Kong, for example, how democratic leaders are being imprisoned and there's restriction of their rights. So, in as much as China is trying to look democratic, the democracy is limited as well. Their internet is restricted and so much. That said, China as well is trying to grow its influence way and beyond the Pacific Ocean, beyond the China Sea, into Africa and other continents as well. That is why we are having the formation of the BRICS group: Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa. And we've seen many other countries trying to join the BRICS summit to counter the influence of US and the dominance of the Western world. So China is positioning itself as a force to reckon with, not just in terms of trade. We've seen now the growing matters: trade, industrialization, technology, even on warfare. We've seen how we have a lot of back and forth between China and US. Remember the first and Donald Trump's presidency, it was marked by a lot of trade wars, sanctions, threats between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. The latest being Trump's invitation to Xi to the inauguration in January 20th. But again, we've seen on the news that President Xi rejected that invite. So the second Trump presidency also may be quite something to watch how they relate with President Xi, as Trump has constantly seen China as a bother on many other things. Chris.
I know we are in this discussion for some time, we are going to have this discussion for quite some time, probably maybe 30 minutes or so. I just want also to go to another angle, whatever you have just said about China. Maybe now, what about America? Because we understand that America has been so much part of the whatever is happening in the Middle East. The America's presence in Syria primarily about fighting terrorism or other strategic interests. Do you think there are any other interests at play as well?
The presence of the American...
And giving us your answer that, do you think the America will support the rebel that removed Assad from power?
Again, as I said, America has been present in Syria for the longest, ever since the fight in Syria when the city of Aleppo was conquered by rebels in Syria. So US has always been there, and it's almost 8 years of civil war, running into 10 years now. But again, you remember the fall of the current Syrian regime marks end of a 50-year regime of the al-Assad family. I know we'll talk about that at some point. But US has been constantly present in Syria. Why? Because of the growing influence of Al-Qaeda. Remember, most of the Syrian rebel armies have been linked to Al-Qaeda forces. So the US has been trying to stamp its root in Syria to quell the growing influence of Al-Qaeda. We all know what Al-Qaeda has done previously in US territories, not just in US territories, but in other countries. Like recently, when they attacked the US embassy in Kenya here, they attacked the US embassy in Tanzania. They struck the Twin Tower in US 9/11 attack. So US has been very keen on the operations of Al-Qaeda. And so, being that many of the rebel forces in Syria were sponsored by Al-Qaeda, then US has constantly been there. Remember, even the current opposition leader, Ahmed, who has led the forces to conquer Damascus, previously was loyal to the Al-Qaeda. But one strategic thing that Ahmed has done is to try to disconnect himself from links to Al-Qaeda. And we've also seen statements from the U.S., Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, they're trying to understand his shift in policy. They've acknowledged his somehow disconnect from Al-Qaeda and such forces. So to some extent, we may see a bit of normalization of relations between the U.S. and Syria, particularly because of the current opposition leader who has, made efforts to totally disconnect himself from that branding of terrorist organization. So Abu Muhammad, the current opposition leader, and one was moved these troops to depose al-Assad from regime now. He's supposed to try change the Syrian outlook. We've seen people go out more freely, celebrations everywhere. So he's trying to make Syria look democratic and open. We saw him meet the current Syrian prime minister, and they promised a peaceful transition of power in Syria. So these are some of the things that the new or the current opposition leader is trying to do that may earn him some good ratings on the global scene as opposed to the previous dictatorial rule, Chris.
Now, how do you see the role of the United Nations and other international organizations evolving in Syria?
Well, I think what has happened at the moment is the world is still a bit in shock. People are trying to understand the situation in Syria because for the last 10 years, al-Assad has been fighting these rebel forces since the collapse of Aleppo. And to some extent, he managed to manage these rebel forces. We remember his admission into the Arabic League. He started to being accepted back into some of these Arabic nations. People started to normalize ties with him. And so to some extent, again, he became a bit more comfortable and forgot that he had the rebel opposition forces that were fighting him. So even seeing people like the UN, the different councils were starting to re-accept al-Assad back into the global diplomatic space. So what has happened in Syria has taken the world by a shock because nobody expected this. People had imagined that al-Assad had managed to destroy, for lack of a better word, to obliterate the rebel forces. What he forgot to take note is that some of these rebel groups, like the HTS, the main group that opposed al-Assad is the HTS. However, HTS was previously labeled a terror group by the US, but right now they are reconsidering interaction with HTS because of, again, as I mentioned, Mohammed, their leader. But al-Assad, to some extent, downgraded or downplayed the strength of the HTS. So even right now, the world is still trying to understand what had happened in Syria. But this is related by three factors. Number one is the war in Israel, between Israel and Iran. Remember, Iran is a serious sponsor of state terror against Israel to most extent. So Iran being busy in Hezbollah war in Lebanon and Gaza with Hamas, to some extent, they took most of their resources to Hamas and Hezbollah and forgot their partner in Syria. So to some extent, crippled al-Assad. Remember, Russia as well is a partner of Syria, and they will sponsor Syria on a live chain. But Russia has been involved in almost a 2-year war right now with Ukraine. So most of its resources is headed towards the war in Ukraine. So this left al-Assad in a quagmire, so that he did not have a lot of support from his traditional backyard. So he will be exposed. He was vulnerable on several spheres. So those three reasons: the war in Israel, the influence of Iran being involved with Hamas and Lebanon, Hezbollah, and forgetting Syria, and of course Russia also being involved in its own war with Ukraine. So those three main reasons must have fueled this surprise downfall of Damascus. When the rumor started, people couldn't believe it. Remember also Trump, when Trump heard about the fall of Damascus, he said that is their own problem. So again, US left things to be to the element. He didn't want to. He said actually,
like it was like we cannot be part of their fight. Like let them fight their own war, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That was what Trump said. He says Syria is not our fight. That is our problem. So that again is a contributing factor to the sudden and shocking fall of al-Assad, because now US just decide no, it's too much. Let them handle their own mess. Please.
You just mentioned about Israel some few minutes ago. My question will be, probably Israel will have kind of taken Syria as a strong ally. Why do you think Israel turned against Syria, turned Syria into a new enemy? Because it seems that they're also kind of interested in what's going on in Syria so far.
Chris, I want you to know that Israel has not turned against Syria. Israel is continuing its offensive against Iran. Syrians are just finding themselves as a playground for Iran to continue its offensive against Israel. So right now what Israel is doing, number one, we've seen them move towards the Golani Heights, where it's border towards Syria, to reclaim more land that was previously alienated by the Syrian forces. So this sudden fall of Damascus has given Israel an opportunity to extend its borders on the Golani Heights and occupy more land on that sphere. So Israel has not turned against Syria. They are just taking advantage of the situation. Remember, Iran had also installed Syria's air defense mechanisms and equipment inside Syria. The increased attacks we've seen from Israel towards Syria is not against the Syrian population. This is an attack against the strategic air defense systems that Iran had installed across Syria to block the airspace of Iran, so that when Israel attacks Iran, then the airspace is blocked. By the time, if it's a missile, if it's a fighter jet, then it cannot be able to land in Iran. So what Israel is doing is to destroy those Iranian missiles defense system and air defense systems inside Syria. So if it's a casualty that is a civilian casualty, that was just by mistake. And the target are those military installations that Iran has inside Syria. Remember in 2014 or 2015, the air defense systems in Syria downed an Israeli fighter jet. It was not Syrian war. It was the installations of the Iranian air defense system that downed that Israel fighter jet inside Syria, Chris.
Israel shares a border with Syria, so its interest in the conflict is obvious, very obvious. What do you think is Israel's current approach to the situation that is happening in Syria?
The current approach that Israel has towards the situation in Syria, number one, is to mock Iran on her face. What we call dancing on your enemy's grave. Because these are some of the wars that Iran started against Israel. But you are seeing that Iran is failing terribly on its allies. Remember what has happened in Hezbollah. All the leaders gone. One by one. All the key leaders in Hezbollah gone. Remember the leaders of Hamas gone. Now their ally in Syria is gone. Russia, who was supposedly to be a friend to assist Iran in Syria this time, is now busy with its own domestic issues. A report was released the other day of the casualties in Russia's war. And the report is so damning. More than 500,000 Russian forces have died. According to the UK Defense Ministry reports, they estimate around 43,000 people dead. In November alone, this this past month. So Russia is increasingly getting more casualties every other day. More actually, the more accurate result is 654,000 Russians ever since the war began in 2022. So Russia in itself is losing this war on a large scale. That is why they reached out to the North Korean dictator to bring them forces as well. But remember, the terrain, the climate, the situation in Russia may not favor the North Koreans because it's a totally different climate. They come from the west, from the east, sorry. And the situation in Russia, the weather may not be so conducive for them. It's a bit cold on that side. So it's still a bit over complex. So what I'll say is at the moment, Israel's approach towards this war is dancing on your enemy's thread. Like telling Iran, you thought you are an Iron Dome, but baby, oh boy, you're just a cry boy. You're just hiding behind proxies to fight your war. So Iran right now is exposed on several scales. Remember, I'd already mentioned the air defense system that they had set up on Syrian airspace is now decimated. So if Israel will send a missile, it just land in Iran in a record time because there is no barrier from Israel to Syria. So right now, I think Ayatollah, wherever he's seated, must be in a lot of concerns. But again, remember there were rumors that Ayatollah is in ICU. I'm not so sure. It was just rumors. So right now, Syria is also still on a bit of a delicate situation with what is happening in Syria. Please.
Israel has often carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Syria, targeting Iranian bases, weapon transfers to Hezbollah, and even the military sites. Hezbollah, what's the other one? There's another one. I don't know what's the name. Let me just find the name. There is Hezbollah, and there is they say Hezbollah, and the other one is can't remember the other one. But anyway, Israel has always been, has sent several strikes in Syria, targeting Iranian bases, weapons, transfers to Hezbollah, and even Syrian military sites. I don't know, but can you explain Israel's strategic objective behind this strike in relation to right now what's happening in Syria?
Thank you. You see, Chris, what is happening right now is Israel is number one sending a serious warning to the new regime Syria. But as you make new changes, choose your priorities. You don't want to mess with Israel. Even as they're now setting out a transition force, a transition government to set up their new democratic government as they have promised, it is a warning shot to Syria that you don't want to mess with Israel. In fact, Netanyahu said the other day, we will get you wherever you are. And one time when Biden was trying to dilly-dally on his support towards Israel, Netanyahu said, if all supporters will go it alone. And of course, you remember how they went and struck the bases in Iran in response to the Iranian attacks without US knowing. US just found out that they had struck, Iranian military installations. So this is a direct warning towards the new government in Syria that choose your priorities. Syria has had a 10-year civil war. So Israel is simply telling them, choose to start rebuilding your economy, rebuilding your infrastructure. You don't want to start engaging in another war right now because it will be messy, it will be bloody, and it will be bad. Remember, since the fall of Damascus, Israel has conducted more than 350 airstrikes into Syria and hit at least 70 to 80% of Syria's military assets all across Damascus, the towns of Latakia, and many other towns are there. So you can imagine the Syrian military is weakened at this moment. The army fled with the fleeing of their president, al-Assad. So the army is weakened. The few army that remain loyal to al-Assad, they are right now being at risk of being persecuted for being collaborators. We've seen discussions where they are being seen as collaborators and may, to some extent, face punishment. So again, Israel doesn't want Syria to continue that war. They just want to tell them keep off Iran, keep off Israeli affairs. That's why again you see how they have increased the occupation of the Hezbollah of Golani Heights, but you've not seen much of aggression from Syria either. I don't know, there was another clan or community that came out and said they want to be part of Israel. It's not been confirmed. It's just been things going on online. It has not been confirmed. There's been dispute that is not true. The Syrian government have said that is not a true fact, but we've seen people around the Golani Heights area saying they want to be part of Israel. So again, Israel is simply sending a warning to Syria. Keep on to your domestic affairs. Keep away from Israel and our wars. Leave our war to ourselves. Be able to manage ourselves.
We are able to manage ourselves. All right. Even as we continue in this podcast at this moment, we are discussing about what just took place in Syria some 5 days ago. Is it 5 days or 13 days ago? Can't remember. But we also talking about who is in charge, what's happening in Syria, how is it affecting the Middle East as well, and how is this, the ripple effect. I know that many countries in the Middle East are affected. Actually, across the Middle East are affected, and we're just trying to discuss, to get to understand as well, to share our views on this. My tales with Midamba. The Assad family ruled Syria for more than 50 years with an iron fist. This according to BBC. Now that has come to an end. Bashar al-Assad became president after the death of his father in the year 2000. His father was called Hafez, who had ruled for almost 3 decades. In 2011, he brutally crushed a peaceful pro-democracy uprising, sparking a devastating civil war in which more than 500,000 people have been killed and 12 million others have been forced to flee their homes. 500,000 people have been killed. Now, Jeff, refugees from Syria have transformed the demographics of countries like Jordan, Turkey, and Lebanon. Beyond just the numbers, Now, how has this impacted the economies, politics, and social cohesion of this nation, the Middle East?
It's one of the biggest contributing factors. The rapid downfall of al-Assad is the economy. Under his watch, the Syrian economy has gone south, gone and tumbled, and was obliterated. So the situation in Syria was totally terrible. There was a humanitarian crisis. There was lack of infrastructure, constant war. But on the backdrop of that, the al-Assad family was living in opulence. They were living large. They were living the fast lane. They were living flashy lifestyle. We saw the other day CNN showing us the garage for al-Assad. He had the Bentley, he had the Rolls Royce, he had the McLaren, he had all the flashy cars you want to see. Mercedes, all kinds of the best cars in this world is what you imagine. He had a collection of vintage cars. He had a collection of sport cars, armored vehicles. They went into his private room. He was buying all the kind of designer clothes, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, all these kind of things that Burberry, all these kind of things that people live in New York, not in Syria, where the economy is totally deplorable. That is what again pushed the citizens to support the rebels against the government. So this has totally impacted the economy of Syria in a very bad way. Can you imagine Syria has a total population of 6 million refugees ever since the siege was started. And now with the fall of Damascus again, we've started seeing nations refusing to admit Syrian refugees. UK the other day gave a statement about the Syrian refugees. We saw US, of course, US right now, we know there's a bit of concern how Trump will handle immigrants. So right now, Syrian refugees are a bit stranded. They're quite in a situation, more than 6 million people. We saw Austria, for example, 1 or 2 days ago, they were offering to pay 1,000 euros to any Syrian who wants to go back home. So the crisis is so bad that even other nations are willing to take economic burdens to take them back, because it's an influx of people, it's an influx of population. So that the world is trying to see, how do you manage this? 10 years of war is not a short time, all the way from 2013. Let's see today. It's quite a big situation. So that is why we are seeing the struggle by UN refugee agencies trying to see how to resettle these people. A majority of them, up to 57 to 60% of the refugees, are in Lebanon, they are in Jordan, they are in Iraq, they're in Egypt. They're supposed to be settled back. Lebanon is not safe either. There's still the war between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. So again, these are Syrian forces who ran to hide in Lebanon, but they're still shelling. There's missile attack, there's bombing in Lebanon. So they are also not safe here. So it's like jumping from the fire into the frying pan, or the reverse is true. Which one comes fast? But they've just jumped from somewhere to another place.
They jump from far to the other place. Now, Syria has created, the situation in Syria has created one of the worst humanitarian crises of our time. And do you think Middle Eastern countries have done enough to address the needs of Syrian refugees and internally displaced people?
Again, Chris, as I already mentioned, that the 6 million refugees in Syria is a growing concern. Middle East itself is backed by a lot of trouble, a lot of problems. So most of the time, people have tried to help the Syrian refugees, but there are many domestic issues. Remember Lebanon, where many of the refugees ran to, they are involved with their own war. We still have issues in Iran themselves. They're not settled. They're supposed to be the big brother, who is supposed to be helping the Syrians, but they are also involved in other proxy wars. We have the Arabian League, where President al-Assad was trying to be admitted back. They had not fully integrated him back into their Arabian League. So much of support will not be able to reach the Syrian people. Again, if humanitarian aid was trying to get access into Syria, remember this is a country which had more than 100 rebel terrorist groups. So even getting to give aid to the refugees was a challenge, because the country is divided, is broken down, and so many rebel groups that control different parts of Syria. So Syria was divided into rebel sections, this kind of group. It is only under the leadership of Mohammed of HTS who was able to consolidate all these rebel forces and told them that our enemy is one. Our enemy is the family of al-Assad that ruled this country for 50 years and iron. So we were able to convince them to come together. Then we push al-Assad outside the country. But previously, then there were war on different other spaces within the Syrian area. So even aid towards refugees became a challenge. Coordinating humanitarian assistance was an issue. So the Syrian people were left to the elements of nature and to the masses of the forces that are on them. So it's been a crisis for them, but we are hopeful that now, when things are a bit settled, then it's going to get better for the Syrian people. More than 2.4 million children in Syria are out of school. They have not gone to school. 1.6 million children grew up, I think it's 10 years. Some of them have grown up from, if you are born in 2013, 10 years, 9 years back, you've stayed your entire life, you only know war. So some of them will grow up not knowing formal education, not knowing civilization. They've only known war all the entire life. So it's a bit of a crisis, but we are hopeful that the opposition leader, Mr. Mohammed, is a bit, looks sober, looks democratic, and may be able to help the Syrian people.
Wow, I tell you, quite extensive discussion here. Jeff, even as we start winding down, probably this is one of the last questions I'm asking. China has been quietly expanding its economic influence across the Middle East, including in Syria. Do you see Middle Eastern countries welcoming China involvement as counterbalance to traditional powers like the US and Russia?
Well, the shift of many countries towards the east, the Middle East bloc has constantly been growing. Remember the initiative, the China Road Belt. One of the things called the China Road Belt project, where China is trying to do economic empowerment, trying to do investments, trying to do aid, trying to do support towards these kind of things in the Middle East. And we've seen many Middle Eastern countries accept China, trying to warm towards China. And then we also see the fingerprints of Russia inside this Chinese activity, maybe backed by the BRICS summit. Remember, Trump also gave a warning to the BRICS guys that if they try doing a currency against the dollar, then you'll be able to do repercussions against these countries that have joined up with China and Russia in this move to build a currency to counter dollar. So the China Belt and Road Initiative, which started in 2013, has seen China to progressing its influence from Beijing towards different countries, not just Middle East alone, into Africa, into North Korea. We've seen them now doing alliances with North Korea. So this is their broader picture of their alignment nations. They're doing it more as an economic project, but it's not just an economic project. Remember, as sometimes they come do like government projects, but their military alliances, their partnerships, their agreements. So these are some of the things that make US to be a bit delusional and a bit worried about China's regional and strategic plan, but into the Middle East and many other countries as well. Iran has been accused of getting support from China by their war and proxy war. So those are some of the things that make the people a bit worried about China and its influence in the Middle East. Statistics have shown that about $10 billion of trade has happened between China and the Middle East. So there's a bit of trade between China and the Middle East. So it shows a bit of affection for the Middle East towards China. Remember, some of these Middle Eastern countries were labeled terrorists by US for a very long time. I keep mentioning Iran. Iran has had trade sanctions with the US for a very long time, affecting its economic power. But for countries like China being able to accept Iran to do trade with them, accepting places like Saudi Arabia to do trade with them. So China gives market to these Middle Eastern countries. So they are able to see China as a more supportive partner compared to the West, which will label them and see them as terrorist groups. We still remember the situation in Afghanistan, where US, to some extent, people felt they abandoned the Afghanistan citizens in a rush, pull out from Afghanistan. So those are some of the circumstances that make the Middle Eastern countries want to shift their allegiance to China, Russia, North Korea, and this bloc that is coming up.
As if there was a key lesson that the Middle Eastern countries could take from Syrian conflict to address their future regional challenges. What would it be?
Yeah. I think the Middle East at the moment has a lot of challenges, geopolitical challenges, cultural challenges. We go to countries like, for example, Saudi Arabia, where there are issues with democracy. Women there, are not having freedom. Women are restrained. At some point, we saw women in Saudi Arabia, protesting it's called hijab, whatever that name is. We saw women shaving their hair in Iran. Saw some points where people were even restricted to go to the movie theater. I saw something as outrageous as Afghanistan, when the Taliban said you cannot show faces of people on TV. And they were saying if you're reading news, I saw that one. I was like, wow, that's on another level. Have you seen that?
I'm getting to hear it from you for the first time. For the first time, I've not heard it. I think I'm gonna find out.
Now, you see, now we are having that a lot of restrictions. They are trying to set those what we call the Islamic states, the caliphates, what we are calling caliphates. They're trying to set caliphates across the Middle Eastern countries. Trying to introduce Sharia laws, trying to introduce strict sectarian policies. Things I keep mentioning Iran. Somebody may think I have an issue with Iran. Iran is very strict with women's rights. They don't allow women's rights. They don't allow women to, access education. Saudi Arabia, for example, we saw like the princess in those Saudi Arabian family, in the royal families, they are fleeing. They're running away from their own countries, and these are people in the royal families. So we are seeing a lot of dictatorial rule across the Middle Eastern countries. So I think some of the things that some of these countries will want to look into is a bit more of embrace towards democracy. What we've seen in Syria is a classical case of the population growing tired of dictatorship. And when the donkey, in Kenya we say punda mechoka, when the donkey gets tired, then at some point just lie down. It will not go anywhere. And that leader is even much safer when the donkey lies down. But sometimes the donkey can get harsh. It will kick, it will bite, it will neigh, it will become violent. So this is what we are seeing in the Middle East. We still remember the uprising in the Middle East again around 2013, 2014, where so many of the dictatorship fell down. We remember Saddam Hussein went down. We remember in Libya, Gaddafi went down. Of course, he was accused to be of American influence, but still, it was the population that threw him out. We remember in Sudan, Omar al-Bashir went down. So many of these Islamic countries, in as much as the dictatorial governments want to impose the Sharia laws and the sectarian and the caliphate laws, you can clearly see a pattern of rejection from the population. As much as many of their citizens are Islamic and they accept the religion, but you see a push against using religion as a way to push people away from the ability to think, to speak, to reason for themselves, to question authority. Yeah. So if the Middle Eastern countries could wake up to this reality that the world has changed, we are no longer in the 90s or in the 80s where the Imam will say and people listen. Right now, people are more informed. People are more aware about their rights. People are more informed about their basic dignity to life and the privileges that the Constitution gives in different countries globally. So the Middle East should be awake to this. And this is what is giving rise even to these rebel groups. What drew al-Assad outside Syria is because of his strict dictatorial rule. Remember the prison in Syria, I think it was called, I'm trying to get the right one, it has a difficult name, that prison. Oh Lord, that word is difficult. I'm trying to get the right pronunciation of that prison. But we saw how al-Assad butchered people in that prison. Anybody who questioned his authority, anybody who questioned his rule, anybody who questioned his authority, who questioned his government, was thrown into that prison.
Saidana, is it say something?
I wish you well, my brother. Saidana, I take that from you. We saw how people were flashing into that prison you mentioned, Saidana prison. Let me try using that word. People were thrown into that prison for years upon years. And we saw prisoners that were moved from the prison. Some of them were totally oblivious of where they are. They have lost track of time. They've lost track of humanity. They've lost track of themselves. They look totally messed up because they've been locked down there, tortured, maimed, people are killed. They even found a book of execution, how many people have been executed. They were even documenting how many people they've executed in that prison. So we are having a pattern of Middle Eastern countries imposing sanctions, imposing strict religious rules against their population, and leaders trying to hold on to power in the name of religion, but the populations are growing tired. So Middle Eastern countries will really try to look into human rights, accept that people are a bit more aware, people are a bit more informed, and people are a bit more exposed to their rights and their freedoms, as opposed to those earlier days when they are just comfortable and keep quiet. It's a sad thing that what is happening in Afghanistan, for example, the Taliban rule, and how Afghanistan has gone many, many years back because of the introduction of the Taliban rule and the strict Sharia laws. I was seeing a photo somewhere of Iran in the 1963s, 1970s. It was just a nice cosmopolitan city. Women were just having their rights, walking around, doing things. It was, very much advanced. You Google or check photos of Iran in the 67, in the 68. It will shock you because it will look like New York. It gives you the Los Angeles vibes, gives you the Paris, France vibes. But right now, that has really, really evolved. Why? Because of strict Islamic Sharia laws. There's nothing bad about a country being religious, but we cannot use religion as a medium to oppress the masses and lock them down. The masses will just fight back. Remember, power is transient, and power comes from the people. And a time comes when the people themselves will demand that power back. And when the people demand power back, it gets loud, it gets messy, and it gets terrible, Chris.
It's just a matter of time. I've seen the right spelling of the prison. It should be Naya, if I'm not wrong.
You tried, even the right one six became too hard for you. It's mouthful.
Anyway, I think that should bring us to the end of this session. Jeff, I think we should end it there, unless you want to add anything.
No, I think I want to end it at that. I won't wish to add more about that because what we are seeing in Syria is something that is continuing to unfold, something that is continuing to develop in every other day. We saw the American President Joe Biden giving a speech or a statement about the falling down of the Syrian regime. And in his words, he described the family of Assad as a regime of oppression. And he said, at long last, the Assad regime has fallen. He said the fall of the regime is a fundamental act of justice to end the long suffering of the Syrian people, that they will be able to build a better future for their proud country. He also said it's a moment of risk and uncertainty. I agree, it's a moment of uncertainty for Syria, but it's also a forms for them an opportunity for them to build back a better future, a proud country, and what they were envisioning. For the 10 years, they've struggled to get back their country. Then this, the words of President Joe Biden, it's a moment for the Syrian people to build better and a proud country that they wanted to see. Thank you, Chris.
Don't you think that statement is by Joe Biden is a bit late?
We are ending the show, but you're taking me back to another thing altogether. You see, anything that Biden says or does in this time of his presidency is what we call a lame duck president. So his pronouncements, his commitments, his whatever he does within these few days of his, I don't know if it's called honeymoon. It's not honeymoon. I don't know this right word. In his heyday, I think that's the right word. In his heyday, they are non-consequential. Right now, we are seeing the world quickly drifting towards Donald Trump. People are trying to reach out to him. People are trying to accommodate him. Nobody expected Trump back in the White House, but we are yet to see what his second presidency will offer. But clearly, it's going to be not so easy. We have seen his... Why are you taking him back and we're ending the show? We have seen his nominees.
All right.
We have seen his nominees in the cabinet. He has really brought controversial people on his cabinet. Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard has been accused of being a spy for Iran. He's been accused of meddling in Syria. We've seen Peter Hegseth, the nominee for defense, is having a lot of scandals. He was this. I think he resigned or was dismissed from the military. So much about the cabinet. We have J.F. Kennedy Jr., who does not believe in vaccines, but is supposedly supposed to be the one who is heading the health decade in the U.S. We have seen the onboarding of Elon Musk, who is a champion of government efficiency. We are yet to see how he's going to.
All right. I think we're just gonna end it there.
It is you trapping me.
That's another good topic for our next discussion. Anyway, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. And as we even end this program, we appreciate your time to stay up to this moment to watch this entire show as we unpack the intricate dynamics of the Syrian conflict and its ripple effects across the Middle East, from regional alliances and humanitarian challenges to the ever-evolving power struggles. It is clear that Syria's story is not just its own, but one that impacts an entire region and even the world. A special thanks to Jeff Winston for his invaluable and thoughtful perspectives. It's conversations like this, I tell you, that reminds us how vital it is to stay informed and be engaged with global issues, no matter how far they may seem from our own lives. If today's discussion resonated with you, please you can like this episode, you can share or leave us a review and let us know your thoughts. What questions do you have in mind about Syria, Middle East, or the broader implication of the conflicts? Join the conversation. And as always, stay curious, stay compassionate, stay tuned for our next episode. My name is Chris Midamba, and this has been Mike Tales with Midamba. I tell you,